in the dense forests of northern India. 4 centuries ago, a storm was rising, not of nature, but of men. The year was 1612. The Mughal Empire ruled like an unshakable mountain. Its armies marched with drums and cannons. Its emperors wrote their words in gold. To challenge them was madness. To defy them was suicide. And yet, a small tribe did exactly that. They were called the Bhils, hunters, archers, forest dwellers. People who knew no palaces, no golden thrones, no written laws. But they knew their land. They knew every hidden path, every stream, every cave, where even a whisper could echo for miles. When the empire's greed reached their forests, demanding taxes they had never paid, an insult they had never endured, these men and women stood tall. No armor, no war elephants, no mighty forts. Only courage, unity, and a burning desire for freedom. For months, they would terrify one of the world's greatest empires. Ambushing soldiers, burning convoys, vanishing into the trees like spirits of the forest. The Mughals called them the ghosts of the hills. But history almost forgot them. This is the story of the Bhils' forgotten revolt. A story not of kings or empires, but of ordinary people who dared to defy power. A story that shows us even the smallest flame can burn the mightiest throne. Before we dive into the rebellion itself, we must step into the world of the Bhils, who they were, how they lived, and why they refused to bow. To understand their courage, we must first understand their world. The Bhils were not city people. They did not live behind stone walls or marble palaces. They lived in forests, in the shadows of mountains, where rivers curved like silver snakes and the trees grew so dense that sunlight itself struggled to reach the ground. Their homes were huts of mud and wood, their wealth measured not in gold but in cattle, grain and freedom. From childhood, every Bhil boy was taught the bow. The forest was their teacher, the animals their test. Arrows were not just weapons. They were an extension of their soul. With a single shot, they could bring down a bird mid-flight or strike a deer in the dark. Women too played their part. They worked the fields, gathered fruits, carried water, but when needed, they lifted the bow, stood shoulder to shoulder with men, and defended their people. They had no kings, no sprawling bureaucracies like the Mughals. Instead, they followed elders, councils, and chiefs chosen for their wisdom, not for their bloodline. Decisions were made in open gatherings, under trees, around fires, where every voice mattered. It was a world of simplicity, but also pride, and that pride was about to be tested. The Mughal Empire, under Jahangir, was a giant stretching across northern India. Its officials, governors, and tax collectors reached into valleys and forests once untouched. To the empire, the Bhils were not warriors, they were subjects, and subjects must pay. For generations, the Bhils had lived free, giving small tributes when convenient, but never bowing to foreign authority. Yet in 1612, a new demand came, a heavy tax, not just in grain, but in silver. For the Mughals, it was routine. For the Bhils, it was an insult. A meeting was called in a large clearing deep inside the forest. Torches lit the night, drums beat slow and steady. Elders with white beards spoke with trembling anger. Young warriors clenched their fists, their bows resting beside them. One elder rose and said, "We have lived in these forests since before their forts were built. We drink from rivers they do not know exist. And now they come to take from us what is not theirs. Shall we bow to them, or shall we fight?" The silence that followed was broken not by words, but by the thundering sound of hands striking the earth. A tribal way of saying, "We choose war." That night, a decision was made that would echo across valleys and frighten imperial generals for months. The Bhils would resist. The first spark came quietly. An imperial grain store set up on the edge of their valley was burned in the dead of night. Flames rose high, lighting up the forest sky. Soldiers scrambled, but by the time they arrived, the attackers had vanished. Only footprints remained, leading into the woods, where no Mughal dared follow. The governor in the nearby city dismissed it as petty theft, but the Bhils were just beginning. Days later, an imperial patrol, 20 soldiers marching through a narrow gorge, was ambushed. Arrows rained from above, striking horses and men alike. The survivors ran, their screams echoing through the valley. When news reached the Mughal governor, his pride was wounded. He wrote angrily to Jahangir's court, "A mere tribe, without forts or cavalry, dares mock the empire. They must be crushed, or others will follow." But crushing them would not be so easy. For the Bhils were not fighting for wealth, they were fighting for dignity, and they had the forest on their side. The revolt had begun. The Mughals expected a quick victory. They were used to open battles, where cavalry thundered, drums roared, and banners rose above thousands of soldiers. But here, in the forests of the Bhils, no banners flew, no armies lined up. This was a war of shadows. The first rule of the Bhils: strike and vanish. Imperial patrols marching through valleys found themselves watched from the treetops. A single whistle from an unseen warrior and arrows rained down like deadly monsoon. By the time survivors regrouped, their enemies had melted into the jungle, leaving behind silence so heavy it crushed their spirit. The second rule: turn the land into a weapon. Streams were poisoned, paths blocked by fallen logs, bridges destroyed in the night. Mughal supply caravans, carrying grain and gunpowder, were set ablaze. Horses panicked, soldiers scattered, and the darkness swallowed their cries. One report sent to Jahangir's court described it. "The Bhils appear as smoke and vanish as wind. Our muskets cannot find them. Our cavalry cannot chase them. Even the forests seem to fight for them." A group of Mughal soldiers crossing a narrow mountain pass. The cliffs rise like jagged teeth on either side. Suddenly, boulders tumble from above. Panic. Men scream, horses collapse. Before they can recover, arrows whistle through the dust. The air itself feels alive with death. And then, silence. When reinforcements arrive, they find nothing but bodies and broken weapons. Not a single rebel captured. The Bhils had struck again. At night, around their campfires, the Bhils sang war songs. Their children carried messages through hidden paths, faster than Mughal couriers could ride. Women brewed medicines for the wounded, sharpened arrows, and sometimes joined the ambushes themselves. One folk song passed down through generations still whispers of those days. "The empire came with steel, we answered with fire. They came with horses, we came with the forest. They came with pride, we came with freedom." The Mughal governor grew furious. He dispatched a larger force, 500 soldiers with muskets, cavalry, and elephants to sweep the forests clean. But how do you sweep shadows? The Bhils divided into small groups, never gathering in one place. They moved like water, scattering when pressed, reuniting when the enemy grew careless. The elephants struggled in the dense undergrowth. Cavalry horses slipped on muddy slopes. Musketeers fired blindly into trees, hitting nothing but leaves. The soldiers began to whisper that the forest was cursed, that spirits protected the Bhils. Fear crept into their hearts, and fear is a greater enemy than arrows. One Mughal soldier's diary, preserved in fragments, tells of a night attack. "We camped near the river. The jungle was silent, but the silence was not peace, it was warning. At midnight, torches appeared on the hilltops. We thought it an army, but when we charged, there was nothing. Suddenly arrows struck from behind us, from the very riverbank we had left unguarded. Men fell into the water, their cries lost in the current. When dawn came, half our numbers were gone, and still we saw not a single rebel face. Weeks turned to months. What the Mughals thought would be a quick suppression became a bleeding wound. Each convoy lost, each patrol ambushed, was not just a military defeat. It was humiliation. The empire's pride was built on the idea that its power was unshakable. Yet here, a handful of tribal warriors made them look weak. And for the Bhils, every victory was more than survival. It was proof that the empire could bleed. But the Mughals were not to be underestimated. They had wealth, endless armies, and time. And now, their patience was running out. They would return with a vengeance, determined not just to defeat the Bhils, but to erase them. The storm was gathering. The forest had become a battlefield. Every patrol destroyed, every convoy burned. Every soldier who entered the hills returned either broken or did not return at all. The Bhils, a people once dismissed as primitive, had shaken the pride of the greatest empire in India. But empires do not forget humiliation, and the Mughals did not forgive. Letters poured into the court of Emperor Jahangir. Governors complained of mounting losses. Merchants begged for protection. Even noble families whispered that the ghosts of the hills were mocking imperial authority. One governor wrote bitterly, "The hills of Malwa bleed us like 1,000 cuts. We march with armies, yet fight with shadows. If this rebellion spreads, the empire's borders will dissolve." Jahangir could not allow that. He ordered a new campaign, one unlike before. This time, not just soldiers, but seasoned generals, siege engineers, and war elephants were sent. The forests would be tamed. The Bhils would be erased. In the summer of 1613, the imperial force moved, an army of thousands. Their drums thundered across valleys, their banners black and red against the sky. The empire was not coming to negotiate, it was coming to crush. But the Bhils were ready. Their chiefs had gathered the clans under one vow. "We will not bow, we will not pay. If we die free." The first clashes were savage. Imperial cannons roared at forest edges, tearing trees apart, turning clearings into graveyards. Soldiers advanced with shields raised, cutting down any who resisted. Villages were torched, grain was seized, captured rebels were hanged as warnings. Their bodies left to swing at the edge of roads. But the forest was still alive. The Bhils struck back. They ambushed elephants by setting pits covered with leaves. Spears tipped with fire pierced through armor. In one battle near the Narmada River, a Mughal unit of 300 was reduced to ashes in a single night raid. Yet for every victory, the cost grew heavier. The empire had endless men. The Bhils did not. One tale survives of a Bhil elder named Ratan, who led his people against a Mughal detachment. With only 40 warriors, he ambushed a caravan carrying supplies. They succeeded, but when the Mughals retaliated with overwhelming force, Ratan was captured. When brought before the governor, he was told, "Bow, and your people may live." Ratan, with chains around his wrists, replied, "The forest bows only to the wind. We bow to no man." He was executed that same day, but his words spread through the hills, becoming a war cry. The Mughal strategy shifted. They realized they could not defeat the Bhils in direct combat, so they turned to scorched earth. Villages were burned systematically. Fields of millet and rice were trampled. Wells were poisoned. Entire clans were forced to flee deeper into the forests, where hunger and disease stalked them. For the empire, this was war by starvation. For the Bhils, it was survival against extinction. The forest had become a battlefield, every patrol destroyed, every convoy burned. Every soldier who entered the hills returned either broken or did not return at all. The Bhils, a people once dismissed as primitive, had shaken the pride of the greatest empire in India. But empires do not forget humiliation, and the Mughals did not forgive. Letters poured into the court of Emperor Jahangir. Governors complained of mounting losses. Merchants begged for protection. Even noble families whispered that the ghosts of the hills were mocking imperial authority. One governor wrote bitterly, "The hills of Malwa bleed us like 1,000 cuts. We march with armies, yet fight with shadows. If this rebellion spreads, the empire's borders will dissolve." And yet, even in the darkest days, resistance did not die. Fires still lit up Mughal outposts in the night. Caravans still disappeared into the forest, never reaching their destinations. Arrows still struck imperial officers when they least expected. The Bhils refused to surrender. They became more desperate, more cunning, more ruthless. Their songs grew louder, their raids more daring. Each fallen comrade was not an end, it was fuel for vengeance. One Mughal officer confessed in a private letter, "We fight not men, but the forest itself. Every tree hides an arrow, every shadow hides death. The more we burn, the more they rise." Months dragged into a year. The empire had spent fortunes, lost hundreds of men, and yet the hills were not tamed. The governor, in shame, admitted to Jahangir, "They cannot be conquered by force. They bend, but do not break. We may kill them, but we cannot rule them." For an empire built on domination, these words were poison, but they were also truth. The Bhils, against all odds, had survived. The Mughal campaign had left scars, villages reduced to ash, elders hanged, families scattered. But the Bhils had proven something greater than victory. They had proven that even the mightiest empire could be defied. And though history nearly forgot their struggle, the echoes of their resistance still live in the songs of the forest, because sometimes survival itself is the greatest victory.